Here on the East Coast near Boston, Massachusetts, it is 4:30 p.m. And so I'm going to kick off our cast-free webinar. If everyone is ready, I'll do a quick thumbs up from our panelists. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to our cast-free webinar. So this is New and Dynamic Ways Forward, UDL in Career and Technical Education. I'm Allison Posey. I'm a senior content editor and producer here at CAST, and I am thrilled to be your host today. Each year, millions of students enroll in career and technical education, or CTE, programs to gain academic and technical skills training for future career opportunities. And today we have the chance to talk with educators Rachel Conover, Abe Ewing, and Amanda Bastoni, who will discuss how they use UDL to design high-quality experiences for all learners in a wide range of environments, including culinary arts, woodshop, and manufacturing classrooms. And in addition, I really hope that regardless of what you teach, we hope that you gain some practical strategies to apply UDL in your classroom. Thank you so much for being here today. And so we do invite you to contribute to the conversation today. If you're joining us live, welcome. You can use the text chat by opening the chat panel from the center of your Zoom window. And please choose the all panelists and attendees from the drop down above where you type so that we can all be able to benefit from what you share. And whether you're joining us live today or if you're watching the recording later, we invite you to also participate in the conversation by using the @cast_UDL to keep this conversation going. So I noticed that many of you have already started to use the chat box to introduce yourselves. Let us know where you are from, maybe what you teach, and welcome. Thank you for making this a dynamic conversation. Please ask questions or put ideas in at any point. We also have a digital handout, and that digital handout bit.ly/3E5H capital J capital P1. On that digital handout, you're able to access the key ideas from this webinar and links to resources that are shared during the webinar. So that'll be available for you throughout today and beyond. So know that that is there for you. Our goals today are to provide context around CTE and UDL and to share specific examples of implementation of UDL in CTE contexts and to share resources and ideas for next steps to apply in your practice. So we would like to give you a moment to invite you to share about your goals for attending and being part of this conversation. So this gives you, again, a chance to contribute to that chat or on Twitter with us. What are your goals for this conversation today?
Allison, can we share our goals too?
We can. Can you hold on 10 seconds?
I just meant in the chat. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to introduce you here in just a moment. That was a spoiler from Amanda. Then you know what, let's just jump right in. Let me introduce our panelists today. So with us today, I am so honored to get to share that we have Rachel Conover here today. Rachel teaches culinary arts in Indian Valley Vocational Center in Illinois. Rachel, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Allison. Welcome, everyone. Super excited to be here. And I think my goal today is really just to hopefully hear some other empowering stories about how educators are making a difference in the lives of their students as we get back to school this year.
Amazing. Thank you. And we were sharing before, it's so fun to see you in the school and actually in your site where you're teaching. Also with us today is Abe Ewing, who works with Woodshop and manufacturing just north of me here in New Hampshire. Abe, welcome.
Hello. My goal today is to hopefully help people feel like UDL might be for them and it can help their practice.
Fabulous. So great to have, and we'll note not only are you in your wood shop, but you're wearing the same shirt live as is on the picture on our slides. So fantastic coordination today.
But people can figure out who I am.
That's right. Also joining us is CAS's own Amanda Bastoni, education research scientist. Amanda, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Allison. I am not wearing the same shirt. It just looks like it. But I'm really excited to learn. My goal today would be to learn from all of the folks who are here. So it's really fun to see all these comments in the chat.
Fabulous. Yes, new ways to engage students. I'm seeing ideas for implementing UDL in the workforce, hands-on courses. So thank you all so much for continuing to reflect on what you hope to gain from our time today. So without any further ado, Amanda, I would love for you to kick us off by sharing about some of the important federal legislation naming UDL in CTE.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Allison. So this is just a quick introduction for those of you who are based in the United States. We have Perkins 5, which is our funding source for our CTE, career and technical education. And this allows CTE instructors to buy new equipment and improve their courses. Recently, the most recent version of this legislation that came out in 2018 specifically called out UDL as an allowable expense so that we can spend some of our funds on helping instructors work with our special populations, and special populations in this case includes English language learners, students with disabilities. It also includes the students of veterans, people who are in the armed forces. So, you know, this is, I guess what I like to say is UDL is not just something Allison, of course, Mindy and all of us appreciate. It's actually recognized by the federal government as a best practice within CTE and other hands-on learning environments. But for those of you who are from outside the country, I think what's important to take away here is just UDL really is a best practice, and we'll hear from the two educators here about how they apply it in their classrooms.
Amazing, thank you. And so let's just turn this over. Rachel, what first resonated with you when you first learned about UDL?
Sure, thanks, Allison. So this is a slide from a training we did with CAS that Amanda actually ran. It's been a couple years ago now. So it was really the start of getting back to school, knowing that we'd be remote. And if any of you are with me on that, I felt like I was just treading water. And this slide showing equality on the left-hand side, where everyone's kind of given the same things that they might need to look over the fence and see into the game. And then equity in the middle, where maybe we're making some adjustments to say, okay, you might need a little bit more help in this area. We're going to give you 2 boxes so you can see into the game. At that time, I felt like I was doing a pretty good job of giving those equity options to my students. But the UDL training that CAS offered really showed us that inclusion and removing the barriers were the ultimate goal. And this just resonated with me. And it was the catalyst for me to start making changes in my lessons, that if I can kind of look towards inclusion and anticipate barriers, I can be proactive in my lesson planning rather than reactive. And that equity part, although it's great, really comes from a place of that being reactive. So that was the moment of change and like the aha moment for me. And in the next slide, you can kind of see for me in Culinary, I wanted to showcase this gingerbread house unit that I did. In years past, I had really thought that this was a way for me to assess some baking basics for my year 1 culinary students, and then some leadership skills for the year 2 students. I would give the gingerbread dough recipe, you can see here. We'd go over it. I thought, this is a great way for the kids to be creative. But I noticed that some of the students, even if they had baking skills, really struggled to access the materials. My lesson plans were text heavy. My recipes were text heavy. And before they could even get to the part where the creativity breaks through and what is your design and how exciting is this, they were overwhelmed. And they had a whole lot of anxiety. And I continued to see this last year, especially that anxiety piece in my students being overwhelmed by traditional language. when I started looking at my lesson plan through the view of the lens of UDL, it really allowed me to say, how can I break this apart to give more access points to my students? So if we go forward to the next slide, this is something I started to come up with. I realized I didn't need them in my culinary class to be reading that much text-heavy materials for the recipes. It might be good for some students, but others were really struggling, whether they might be dyslexic or they had low vision. It left them out. The recipe itself was a barrier. So I began to draw recipes for my students and sketch out kind of the key ingredients. And in culinary, we organize things in a way called mise en place. 3 parts for a recipe: ingredients, tools, and the process. I noticed that the more I did this, all of the kids seemed way more engaged, and it gave options. They could choose a traditional written recipe, they could choose a sketched out recipe, or they could draw something on their own. As I saw this engagement, it was really evident to me that my students needed these options for them to be able to really meet their own potential. So I developed this with my wife. It has now become more of a digital tool. And it's a little bit hard to see here, but I even added checkboxes so the students can regulate their own process and progress. And as an instructor, I can easily circulate the room and see where they are. None of these improvements really would have occurred to me if I hadn't taken the time to really sit down and pre-plan looking at the UDL framework. There were access points that I had overlooked. And even thinking through equity for my students, I was making adjustments, but oftentimes they were too late. I'd already lost the engagement. So this is one example of how even just thinking through using visual tools in addition to traditional written text, you can engage your students more and you can anticipate barriers. And once you do the work, it's front loaded, it's there. So I have this every year, I have these recipes to pull out now, and it gives me a sense of freedom and it empowers my students to do their best work.
Rachel, before we jump on, I just want to note, you said a word early on, this word creativity, and you wanted to get to this creativity, and there were all these barriers there. And so I just wanted to appreciate how a simple design change, like you're saying, that you were proactively thinking about how to engage students through reducing some of those barriers, how you were getting at this big piece of creativity that you didn't want to lose in your course. So I just want to thank you for noting that.
Yeah, and I think that resonated with some of the other instructors in my building, and even some of my friends that teach in what we would consider traditional classrooms, ELA instructors, that potentially the part even in reading and coming up with, a way that you might read through a text and reimagine it. If the student isn't accessing the text, we're never going to get to that great part where they interpret it and make it their own. So what can we do to help find those access points? And again, that work at the beginning pays huge dividends for us as instructors and for our students when we start seeing their final products. I think it allows creativity to blossom. So part of that, allowing their creativity to show, also really brought mine out. In the next slide, I kind of began to play with the way I gave them information. In years past, this would be a wall of text. And I know it seems like a simple shift, but really just blocking out information and grouping it together so students can read it more clearly. Thinking through the colors that we use in our slides. Again, if someone's low vision, have we considered what they'll be able to read? Helps us make sure everyone is coming to the table, and if they're doing in-person or remote work, that there's going to be clarity in those materials we provide them. And here is, for the first time last year, I gave options on how students would submit their work. They could use Google Meets and do a one-on-one chat with me. They could use Google Classroom. And then I incorporated some more apps last year, like Remind or Flipgrid. This was not my comfort zone. As a professional chef for 20 years, like tech was not my jam, but I needed to meet my students where they were at. And looking again through the lens of UDL, I realized that traditional written work, written language possibly wasn't where they live. They live in a more visual world. So I tried to incorporate that into the tools I gave them for planning, and then to be more flexible in how I accepted work from them. And what I got back was amazing. In this next slide, all of my students got to choose. Do I want to draw my plan? Do I want to take a short video describing my plan and then document some of the work I'm doing? Would I like to use Google Slides and plug in icons? So they really got to make it their own, and they were empowered in their own process. It removed some of the part where in years past, I had to like pull the information out of them. And all of a sudden they were self-regulating because they were comfortable with the mediums that they were using. Here's a picture of a student just holding up their sketch. And below that is another one that submitted a video to me. She had drawn out her pictures. She was showing me how she was carving out her gingerbread. And what was super cool about that video is she even self-corrected and said, oh, I need to use my claw technique. Chef would want me to do that. So she was applying like a technical skill, but I didn't have to be in the room to say, oh, bring your fingers back. It's always a nerve-wracking part when, I'm sure Abe can speak to that, like kids with machinery or knives, whew, you know, there are days where you're just sweating it out. But it was awesome to see that the student themselves self-corrected and knew that. And then I could be there even though we were towns apart. That was one cool part about the remote learning experience. In the next slide, one of the students who was a second year really went above and beyond. And I asked the second years to challenge themselves, right? And kind of, we had scaffolded our learning throughout the entire first year. And this is a challenge that they get to do again in the second year, but they have to incorporate more fondant work and some more technical skills. And on the bottom is, the student used screenshots of SpongeBob's world and almost wrote out a narrative story for me of what she wanted to explore with the creation. And in the top is a video. It's a screenshot there. I think this looks a whole lot like SpongeBob's underwater world, and I am a huge SpongeBob fan. So I was thrilled with her creation. But again, the part that really made a huge impact for her and for me as her instructor, this whole video was her reflecting and speaking to the points of the challenges that arose, how she problem solved through them, and how she demonstrated her resilience. I truly believe that if we were in my traditional classroom setting 4 years ago, before I had applied some of the UDL practices and became more flexible in the way I provide my students materials and then accept work back from them, I might have missed out on these key moments. This is something that will stick through with this student for a lifetime, even though it's just gingerbread, right? She learned how she can manage her own anxiety. She learned how much she had developed her time management skills, her ability to pre-plan and be organized in her work. And those were not her strengths when she entered the classroom. And here we had this awesome documentation of it. So for me, this gingerbread unit kind of was one of the places where I really spent time pre-planning and then proved to me the dividends that pre-planning and UDL application paid off and started to shape everything else I did in the classroom. And the next
So, well, before you continue on, and if anyone wants to respond or comment in the chat, we do invite you to do so. There are a couple points I just want to appreciate as well. I really appreciated how you noted that some of the technology was not in my comfort zone, but you were trying to meet the students where they were. So it's not like you have to go out and know all the technologies and all the options out there, but that mind shift of then you again noted you might have missed some of these pieces of learning that were really deep and really rigorous and expert learning had you not provided some of that flexibility or not gotten out of your comfort zone in order to offer some of those options. So do you have any recommendations for, how do you kind of take that first step to break down some of that comfort that may be built into our teaching practices?
My first step really was, Amanda says this, I've heard her say this before, that like we need to model failure for our students, and we need to model for them what it is to step outside of our comfort zone, because then it lets them know that like, you don't need to just get the A on a paper. That's not what we're looking for. I want to see you fail, and I want to see you try again. And I'm going to show you that I do that as well. And that idea, that concept shift was, someone said they're an expert at modeling failure. Yeah, I mean, the kids get to see me fail all the time. But it was a shift in my mindset that really helped me move forward. And it was the time I spent looking at the lessons and having what I believe to be a wonderfully graphically organized kind of layout of the UDL framework. And when I would look at that and think, this isn't too wordy, there are nice color chunks here, words are grouped together. Honestly, just looking and then realizing myself like, hey, maybe my materials should be that way. That's a great first step. I'm going to do this. This is the old school, hold it up to the camera. Look at that. So it doesn't have to be high tech, but even just adding some color and like my Bitmoji to a syllabus. I bet a lot of us do that now after remote learning. Maybe not everybody, but just using your Google tools so that things are slightly more interesting for your students is a wonderful first step. I think engagement was the area that I first started treading into with UDL. How do I better engage my students? And I think that's a great place for all of us to start, because if they're not engaged, they're not learning. Is that a helpful answer, Allison?
So helpful. Thank you for taking a moment to go there.
And I felt like once I kind of got slightly more comfortable, it's always a work in progress. This is never completed work. But once I got more comfortable with those engagement tools that were mine, again, I rely on Google Slides, my Bitmojis, Flipgrid, a few tech tools. I never go more than 5 in a year. I preload and train my students how to use 5 tech tools each year. So they're not like, oh no, what's she gonna spring on us today? So then I kind of moved more into thinking of how is my classroom as a whole meeting the needs of all my learners? How am I anticipating barriers there? And I hadn't done that before. In a culinary classroom, I was just concerned like nobody loses their finger today, but I didn't think about spatial organization. What if I have a student in a wheelchair? The table height, how can they navigate the room? I hadn't thought through my equipment. With a student with low vision, being able to go to a gas burner stove, she might not have been able to see that the gas was on. So I switched to some induction burners for all students, so they could see an electric blue light come on, and they can hear a frequency to know when it's on. And that allowed me to then say, who would like to opt out of using the induction burner instead of giving one student an induction burner and potentially shining a bright light on what made them feel different already. So that was that, again, sitting down and really thinking through each lab, how do I anticipate barriers instead of just react to them in the moment?
And it sounds like what was essential for one student could be good for many students.
And that is exactly it. It was essential for one, but now I've had to buy so many more induction burners because all of the students want to use it. They love it. All of the students want to use those visual recipes that I call picture the process. So what was really essential for a few benefited everyone. And it's just so cool to see when it works that way. And then this video is a screenshot of me packing remote learning materials last year. I did not want to just send home a bunch of worksheets. So I sent home meal kits. So even this gingerbread unit was at home, but students use Google Forms. They had to think through what they needed. They had to anticipate their own barriers at home. Am I babysitting a sibling? Do I have the correct cooking tools? Do I need to sign out an induction burner from chef? So all of those things demonstrate employability skills. And in the world of CTE, really the world of education, employability skills should be our goal. We want lifelong learners, but we absolutely want people that can apply that learning in a profession they're passionate about. So even that remote content was able to be more impactful because of the way I was able to shape and craft the lesson.
Rachel, I want to join your class remotely. I think I stand a better chance at learning some of these skills.
Yeah, I do like to teach online, because then if I'm like, ooh, that looks a little burnt, I don't have to taste it.
And smell it in the full.
And I don't have to help with any of the cleanup, so. But these were kind of, again, one lesson that I applied just a few techniques, and it made a world of difference. When I stopped thinking about where I wanted my students to be and began to consider how do I meet them where they are at, and then set goals with them in conjunction with them, the quality of work improved, and my ability to document student growth actually improved dynamically as well.
And I also appreciate how you noted it does take a little more time at the beginning, that proactive planning piece, but it's front loaded then. And then you're seeing this higher quality of work, you're seeing this engagement, you're seeing this reflection on the expert learning that's happening. And then it's designed like that for the next time you get to deliver that lesson. And so it seems like, yeah.
And for, allows teachers to circulate the room better and like take a knee with one student that might need that more one-on-one help, because they are more equipped to really like work through materials at their own pace in their own way and self-regulate and use their mental organization and executive functioning to stay on track. That's not my work anymore. I'm just there to support, because I, can front load the lesson with what they need.
And having more one-on-one time with students just seems invaluable. So being able to open that up is, very exciting. So please feel free to put ideas, questions in the chat or on Twitter, because we'll continue to monitor the Twitter beyond this live webinar. Rachel, thank you for some of that background. Abe, we're going to turn to you and then open this up as more of a panelist discussion. So Abe, let us know for you what initially resonated about UDL and how did you get started then in your practice?
So what Rachel just said about kind of being a mentor in the learning rather than the provider of information is really what I think that's such a cool thing you said there at the end, Rachel. Thank you. So for me, when I was first teaching, I came from industry and I knew how to work in a wood shop. I knew how to build things. I knew how to create. And coaching, I knew how to hold a room, but I really didn't have like teacher speak. I knew what I was doing, but didn't know why it was good. Like, for instance, I knew a daily routine was important, but I would question whether or not the things I was doing were worth continuing to do. So I had a really smart, awesome person help me work through the UDL and introduce me to UDL, who said, okay, so you're stretch and flex every day. That is legitimate. Your kids are going from not moving all day long, being a math class, to now you're really like working that into the daily routine to get your kids awake and into the mood to learn in your room, that's awesome. You're prepping them. So UDL, I guess, really empowered me to be the teacher I knew I needed to be, and made it legitimate, where sometimes you kind of feel like an imposter moving into a regular school building. So that's how I first kind of got hooked on UDL. I thought I need to learn how to be more of a teacher the way some people, like administrators, want me to be a teacher. And so it helped legitimize my practice. I'd say what really resonated with UDL. It allowed me to look at what I was already doing, reflect on what I was doing, and then I was able to tie a lot of it to the UDL checkpoints. And then it helped me focus on specific areas that I knew needed improvement. And then in the end, it really allowed me to focus on learning, which is the part I like, rather than just, here's the content, guys. Like, I'm going to put up a slideshow and run through it real quick because I want to get you on the tools. It allowed me to really focus on the kids knowing how to use the tools correctly, which empowered the students. You can go to the next slide. So one of the projects I love doing in my classroom is these speakers. And I'm gonna hold up my speaker like Rachel did. These are speakers. And so much of me wanted to just have kids cut where I cut with really dangerous equipment. I want to control the situation so much because I want to keep it repetitive. Well, cutting where the teacher tells you to cut and using it exactly how the teacher to create 17 identical things probably doesn't keep engagement up as much as I wanted. So how do I keep kids flowing through the room in a safe order when I need to focus on certain kids? So these speakers, by the way, you put your phone in them and they play music. So you turn them up. This is a really good intro to woodworking or intro to shop project because it allowed the autonomy and allowed some choice. That one on the slideshow is also one of my students. Here's another one. The kids get into making boom boxes. They're pretty sweet. I make them walk down the halls with them after they finish them on their shoulders. I encourage strongly. So the problem of practice was, how do I allow this autonomy? How do I allow flow in the room? And how do I make sure kids get on the tools quickly and efficiently? And so what my mentor did from CAST is they helped me create a slide deck. Now in construction and carpentry and woodworking, whenever we have a repetitive task that we want to streamline, we call it a jig. So we can make jigs for the drill press, we make jigs for the table saws. Essentially, my slide deck is my learning jig. Like, it helps me focus on what the students are learning, what they're taking away, and then also focus on the room at the same time. Where I used to try to get all that attention on me to show the machine, now I'm getting a lot of buy-in built in via the slide deck before we get to the machine. And so instead of being compulsory, draw a picture like I draw a picture, the kids are trying to figure out and design things they think will work on their speaker. So the other thing the slide deck did was, so I wanted to increase collaboration. And collaboration in my classroom is, I think, one of the most important workplace skills. It's also one of the, it's part of UDL. So, sorry, I get a little nervous. So the slide deck.
No, it's so great. Well, I'm still kind of processing the first piece that you were describing. Really sounded to me like you were offering multiple means of students being able to get the information they needed instead of just, and I can, from my experience, I remember gathering around as the teacher showed something. I'm short. I never could see what the teacher was doing. Usually I couldn't hear what the teacher was saying. And so if I'm understanding the example, that just by having this multiple means of representation through a slide deck, students were able to gain access to that information in more than one way.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I love it. And it's so simple. Again, like Rachel was describing, such a simple change. Then all of a sudden students are getting access to what they needed to do in more than one way.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get away from the look at me, do what I do, and really get the kids working together to problem solve on their own. But how do you do that when the machine could cut off their fingers? And so trying to balance that, I kept wanting to resort back to the way I learned, and UDL helped me help all the kids learn. So by the time we got to the machine, I had them. So with that collaboration piece, they're working together. They're designing a project. Part of UDL checkpoint 8.3 give clear goals and responsibilities. And so by creating the slide deck, we have a photographer, we have a writer, we have a designer, and a safety officer and presentation leader. So each student involved in the group, instead of it just being a group project, here, go do your thing, each student knows how they're supposed to contribute to the group and can hopefully get more comfortable because they chose something they were good at. Maybe they were the best photographer and there was another great photographer in their group. Well, now they're learning to collaborate by deciding who gets to take that role. At least gives parameters to what their roles and responsibilities are. It's worked really good in my shop building their projects.
And is this a real world skill that you need to be able to have in your career, this kind of collaboration?
Probably the most important skill.
Amazing.
in manufacturing and woodworking, being part of the team, flowing, being able to admit what you don't know, being able to know what you do know and work together, that's it, whether you're building houses or building filters for Millipore. So it really helped with that. So here's this slide right here, slide 18 is an example of what one of the slides in the learning jigger, learning slide deck does. So instead of me saying, add a video, I'm letting the kids use their Chromebooks to research their video on how speakers work, tell me why they picked that video. At the end, they're going to present their slideshows. And also it removes some of the barriers of creating a slideshow from scratch in that it's prompted. So while certain kids in the class are working on their slideshow collaboratively, I can take the other group, just 4 instead of 16, to the joiner, the planer, the bandsaw to work through the physical part. And we can go on to the next slide.
And I have to say, Abe, I love sentence starters. When I'm able to copy and paste something that's already there, I am absolutely going to do it. So I can focus my attention on what I really want to say and not what am I supposed to say? So I appreciate that.
It really helps. So this is actually an example of student work. So by giving them that prompt of how speakers work, they picked this video, which is kind of electrical speakers, but they're still going through how speakers work. They're getting curious. They're trying to investigate. And then also why they picked the video. They're getting some autonomy, some buy-in, and showing why they were in tune with that. And they're all helping the writers write. So there's a designated writer. I found that immediately the writers start to struggle with getting all of their group's content onto the page. And here comes that collaboration piece. They're in this together, working through a similar project. And now they start to kind of really dive, instead of a kid being standalone, they're diving into how speakers work, how these acoustic speakers work.
So it used to be that this assignment was pretty individual, and through adding some of these options for collaboration with these sentence starters, with the options for them to find their own videos and these defined roles that were important for the entire group to support each other to do, all of a sudden you're getting this more rich understanding and conversation around kind of your goal, right? Like how the speakers are even working in the first place. It's not just about the cool boom box that they're walking down the hallway with.
Right. You really get the buy-in helps so much. And this slide right here. So the kids put together their step list. I know how to build a speaker. I've witnessed hundreds of them built over the years and built several myself. So the first step is pick out your wood. Formally, it would be each kid would go find their wood, These are all made out of scrap wood. It's their first high school project. But now I'm looking at the group saying all 4 of you. So instead of kids, they'll start picking up different types of wood, different pieces, trying to figure out what it is that they're even going to use to make their speaker. Well, that's way cooler than being on your own or missing a day of class, being left behind, all that stuff. So they start to really work as a nucleus around the shop, which allows me to see where they're stuck. If they get to using the joiner, and I could tell that they're not getting close to the joiner, that group's not quite ready to go, I can then stop what I'm doing and go over and help them get nudged to the next step. And they've helped identify what the next steps are collaboratively. So the engagement, the collaboration is so much deeper. And then how do I take it from here? So what it's done with this slide deck, this learning jig, is now I'm at the joiner with just those kids. The other kids in the room, I usually have 16 more kids in the room, they're with their groups and I know they're working towards the learning. And now I can focus 100% on the safety of the machine until that group's done with it. They move on to their next step, which may or may not be a machine. And I can really help the flow of the room so much better and be more attentive to what my students need.
And if I could pause you for just a second, because I had a moment that I'm wondering if others in this webinar are having too, that you just said something that was very similar to what Rachel was saying, that through this design that is more flexible, but also very scaffolded toward the learning goal, you then had more time for individual one-on-one instruction. So I hope if you all are making connections like that, please feel free to put those ideas in the chat, because you're, culinary arts, woodworking and manufacturing seem very different, yet UDL was this framework that you were both using to get at this expert learning in these very different disciplines. And then you're seeing some similar pieces come to play in your classrooms, which woohoo, just made me, feel like that was worth a call out. So please feel free, as you all are hearing those, to make note of them in the chat.
I agree. Thank you for noting that, Allison, because like Abe and I, we are multiple states apart from each other. We haven't met in person before, and we certainly haven't collaborated on any of our lesson planning, but because UDL is the language that we can speak, even when we're teaching these very different curriculums, we find these commonalities. And, our students, they're learning different materials, but they're all students. So the more we find ways as educators to speak that language of UDL, the more equipped we are to help them and to share our materials and our strategies with each other.
So exciting.
It really is.
Okay, thank you for that pause. Abe, please continue. So what are some of your next steps with UDL as you look toward the coming year here?
It really is exciting. It has changed my life as a shop teacher, because now I get to enjoy kids creating and making and learning new things instead of trying to download information into their brain, push it in and then go see if I get to have fun again. It's really made my job much more enjoyable. And so where do I go next? So now I've got my classroom controls become streamlined. I know what the learning goals are. The kids, I think, feel like I'm a better teacher, because they say, why am I doing this? And I can say, actually, UDL 8.3 research-based best practices say this is really good. So that's where we're going with this, guys. And they buy into it. They own it much more. Now, one of the things as a shop teacher I need to improve on is how to manage and teach self-regulation. So before I was focusing on managing the class, now where I'm taking UDL is, now that the class is managed, the flow is managed, how can I help those kids that are oftentimes put in our classes, our clientele, manage their emotions and start to show that self-regulation that we know is necessary in the workplace. So the slide right here is a little chart that's visual of how am I doing today. So when I have a kid that I need to remove from the room, well, two things. I do this once a week with every kid in every class in the shop, and they share out. My first block class, you see the first question is, how much have I slept last night? And then what have you had to eat or drink today? my kids would come in sleepy, and then they would all say they had 4 or 5 hours of sleep last night. And then they would all say they have not had anything to eat. And I'd say, maybe this is why we're cranky. Like maybe if we get a little more sleep, a little more food, we're going to enjoy being around. I had kids
Or
compliment
the 2 Mountain Dews before class.
the Barks root beer on the desk. So the kids now, they all go get lunch or breakfast together before they come to my class. So now I'm seeing the pre-packed breakfast right there in the beginning of class get pulled out. They know they need to eat to start their day. And it's so simple and it's huge. So now when I end up in a moment of intervention or a moment where I really need to intervene with a kid's behavior, I pull one of these out and I say, can you fill this out for me?
And in a UDL way, can it be in multiple means?
Right, they could, and I won't mind. I've done it both. Some kids I have asked to fill it out. Other kids have a para that they can work through it with, another adult. But just 2 days ago, I had a girl in my class that was dealing with tons of anxiety. And it wasn't even about my class, what I came to find out. And it framed a conversation. She came to me kind of as a mentor in between classes. And so how do I have this conversation where someone's upset? I have no idea what they're upset about. I pulled out one of my how am I doing today slips, and it helped frame the conversation. She verbally told me everything on the list. And now she grabs some of these. Now she fills them out and comes and talks to me. And it's really helping me figure out what is going on with kids, but more importantly, it's helping them learn what's going on with them. So instead of being the bad kid or the kid that's stressed out, full of anxiety, they're like, okay, maybe it has something to do with this, no sleep or football, whatever it may be.
And again, to just kind of use a word I've heard both you and Rachel say, that student ownership over not only their learning, but also their physiology and their mindset to be able to get into that academic, context that they're in with you.
And the Mountain Dews, for instance, that they usually lead to like tickle punch when the kids tickle each other and then it turns into punching. That's usually right after the several Mountain Dews in the morning.
For sure. When you're in that no touching moment, where you're like, am I a kindergartner teaching kindergarten? No touching.
With
Yeah.
high school.
And Abe, I want to steal that from you. I do a like reflection with the students each week and have some of those, what made you frustrated, could be outside of school, but even that, like the way it's organized and the colors and the kind of like sketched out framework, that in the reflection is UDL, but also just the way it's laid out for students is just more engaging. They'll want to look at it. They'll want to pay attention to it. So I love that. And it's also like, should empower teachers to know that sometimes just that in and of itself, making sure we're getting in touch with our students and they are getting in touch with like how they feel in the classroom, that can be a great starting point too. Like most of us do that anyways, but to make it just a part of our regular practice and, put it on paper like this is a great idea.
And Rachel, sometimes these behaviors I would perceive as disrespect because I know I'm cool and awesome. So if this kid's having a problem with me, it's definitely him. Maybe it's not either one of us. Maybe it's the fact that they have not had any sleep. There's something going on in their home life. And so instead of perceiving it as disrespect or defiance or even laziness or something else, I can figure out that, oh, this is a clear problem that the kid just needs help with. And it's helped me connect with my students way better. Definitely more than I thought. Like, it's definitely helped me improve.
And one of the pieces, Abe, if I could pick up on, you said something there that resonated for me. And it's not that we need to know as educators everything that's going on outside of our classroom with our students, but being able to have a common language to say, we've got a job to do in our classroom today. And there could be some barriers to get back to the fence example that you gave at the beginning, Rachel. There could be some barriers and they're going to be different for each of us on different days. how can you be empowered, and by you I mean to the students, to be able to reduce those barriers and get to the task at hand. I think is really powerful. So we've shared a little potential for where you see UDL in CTE and in your context in the next, in the coming year. Rachel, you shared a little bit about UDL as this common language and this lever to elevate your practices. Abe, you were talking about the justification of UDL for the strategies you were already using. And both of you, I think, made this incredible connection between expert learners and work readiness. And so I wonder what's one concrete piece that you're going to do, this year with respect to UDL? Rachel, do you want to go first?
Sure. I actually, I'm trying this year to continue the practices, like I've already started in my classroom, but I'm challenging myself to start introducing them beyond the classroom. I teach cooking classes for students with special needs outside of school. And I also in the summer work with restaurants, commercial restaurants, to really reshape some of their training procedures and onboarding for culinarians. So really, I am honing in on that. Like, if we can't read the recipe, how are we going to create the recipe? And I think it applies way beyond culinary, right? If I can't read the training material you gave me, I will not be able to do the task that you are asking me to do. So I'm putting a ton of my energy and effort into making those more accessible, using icon-based language, making little videos instead of everything doesn't have to be a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be written out. Using apps like Mote to give verbal feedback to students and employees instead of relying on written communication alone. So I'm really challenging myself to move past words on the page. I love reading, I love writing, but I want to make sure that I am presenting more options to students and employees.
Awesome. Abe, how about you?
So I'm really focusing on for the speaker project. I feel like I'm to a place where I have it where I want it. But one of the cool things about Woodshop is making new things and discovery and trying to figure out how to incorporate UDL into more projects and really use it as my complete framework. I still have a lot of work to do. Definitely the self-regulation piece is where I know I need to improve, because I see such a huge return in that area with my students. The students that might have felt like the bad kids or school wasn't for them, I can see really are starting to enjoy my class and feel like they're really learning. So I need to do more. I'm going all in on everything UDL this year, and that's really what I need to focus on.
And just, from my perspective again as well, I've been in this world for 12 years and there's always more. So that is what is really exciting, I think, about UDL is we just, wherever we are, we'll just keep adding a little more into it. And Amanda, I wanted to give you a chance to share a little bit here, one from your CTE experience yourself, but also to highlight some of the work that you're doing with CAST and how we can think not only about classrooms, but push into workforce development and professional development.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I just wanted to say, really quick, I wanted to reflect and just shout out Rachel and Abe here because, we talk a lot about expert learners, but expert teachers are essential to have. And what both of them have told us is that UDL has created a safe way for them to evaluate their own teaching and push themselves. And I think that's especially important in CTE because, we come from industry. Rachel talked about that, Abe talked about that, and your content really well, but you're not, you're nervous about teaching. And so you're going to resort back to how you were taught, what you know. And the world has probably changed since you were last in school, right? You probably were in industry for 10 or 15 years or whatever. So, things have changed. So I just think that there's this wonderful synergy between expert teaching and expert learning. And I just want to really compliment Rachel and Abe on their ability to use the UDL framework to evaluate their own teaching and to the benefit of their students. So I just want to say that. And I'll share my email in the chat if folks want to connect outside of this webinar. But basically what we're doing at CAST is really thinking about offering professional development for apprenticeship programs for CTE. We have a lot of options that we are offering, you know, some resources like BioFab Explorer, which is in the handout. People can check out. It's a free resource if you're involved in biotechnology. And CTE Folio, which is this e-portfolio that we created. But I just don't want it to end, you know, with this. I want it to end with like, how awesome are Rachel and Abe, and how well are they modeling, you know, really like thinking about teaching as a practice, and thinking about teaching as something that we all need to constantly be, you know, trying to get better at.
And to continue to ground in the students. I'm so appreciative of the way each of you continue to say, and here's what I saw in my students and how they were learning and how they were engaging and how they were collaborating and connecting and building those real world skills and that aren't always on just a paper and pencil kind of experience. So I do really want to thank you for continuing to ground in the students as well.
Allison, could I jump in one quick thing and just say, also, you know, with non-traditional students, so in CTE, we think about, there's certain programs that have a lot of maybe a certain gender is enrolling in that program, maybe manufacturing a lot of males, or we have careers in ed, a lot of female students maybe enrolling. And Abe talked about this in our practice session, but I think it's worth bringing up again, how it helped him support some non-traditional students. And he's actually seen an increase in female students taking woodshop. So maybe in the last 1 minute, Abe, since we don't have a ton of time, I just thought I'd throw the ball to you and see if you wanted to talk about that. And then Rachel, I also don't want to overlook the fact that you've seen students with disabilities come from your program and, you know, get jobs, secure jobs. And, you know, it's because I think the way you're teaching. So kind of want to throw the ball to both of them in those areas, Allison.
So by reflecting on my teaching through UDL and incorporating more UDL, I think it's a more comfortable class to be in, and kids are able to step inside that learning zone easier, and I make themselves vulnerable. And I've seen the number of female students is currently right around 40%, which is really high compared to most woodworking programs. And I think it has a lot to do with my incorporation of UDL, making everybody comfortable in learning the process and making the room a safer, better place to be in. So I'm all in this year.
We might call it minimizing threats and distractions, right?
Minimizing threats and distractions.
Good. And Rachel, I don't know if you want to talk.
Yeah, mine really is the same as Abe's, that minimizing, you know, threats and distractions. And like I said before, have that like, you know, opt out as opposed to like opt in for kids. Like we all get the same things as much as we can in terms of tools. Like the student that might have low vision isn't the only one with the induction burner anymore. Like I'm going to purchase those for all of the kids. I'm going to find a grant to do that, you know, do that work in the beginning as the instructor and make sure space more inclusive. Also just considering, you know, there are only 7% of executive chefs or restaurant owners are female. So I try to like make sure that kids that come into my class know that like you don't just have to be a pastry chef, you could be an executive chef. And they can see, I try to find videos and images that like, you know, I want to see black hands making bread dough because we don't often see that in cookbooks. It's a very small segment. So if they don't see someone being successful in the field, they won't imagine it for themselves. So what can we do to make sure those students and success is represented in our classroom, whether it's a person with a disability or someone who, like you said, is a non-traditional kind of student in the classroom. Like representation means everything.
I love it. Thank you all. And we want to thank you all for participating today. Please feel free to add any questions or comments in the chat. We have a treat for you. The Unbound Classroom is a wonderful book from Cast Publishing by Chelsea Moreau, and you can save 20% during the checkout if you use the code UDL CTE 914, and that's good through the month of September. So we invite you to check out that book. And we do invite you to keep in touch with us. You can sign up for the Cast newsletter at bit.ly/cast-newsletter. So please do find out what's going on at Cast and collaborate with us. We want this conversation to continue around. We know amazing things are happening out in your work as well. So we want to connect with you. So please do feel free to let us know how this webinar was for you. We have a survey that you can take. It's bit.ly/UDL-CTE-survey. And you can also give us ideas for future webinars that you would like to hear. We're always game to hear what you would like to hear about from Cast. So I would like to thank our captioner, Mindy Johnson, Allie Berg, and our Cast Tech team. And importantly as well, thank you so much to Abe, Rachel, and Amanda for being with us today, for sharing some of the hard work that you're doing. I really appreciate everything you're doing to really make sure that all of your students have access to the rigorous, challenging learning in your site. So thank you so much for contributing today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to see all these CTE passionate folks or, read about them in the chat. It's great.
Thank you all.